guess you're constantly having to rebound from the dysfunction that you're around. But coming up, what really saved me was my faith. And my mom, despite all the horror stories, she was a very, very religious woman. We were raised Christian. My mom went to church every Sunday. And it wasn't until I was a late teenager that I quit going to church with my mother because I got so sick of the hypocrisy. And I remember we'd go to church, and my parents didn't do anything together, so they surely didn't go to church together. But I remember we'd come home on Sunday after a really good sermon, and I would be so on fire because, you know, to me, reading the Bible and learning from the Bible was just so great. And I'd be looking at my mom, and in church she really seemed like she was getting it. But as soon as we'd get home, I don't know if being at church reminded her of how imperfect she was or how imperfect our home life was, but she'd come home, and my dad, he knew how to set off her buttons. You know, he'd have the garage door up, or he'd be smoking, or he might have left one dish on the counter, and everything had to be spotless in my mom's house, you know. And she'd come home and she would just go off and start cursing, and this was almost every Sunday. So I finally got tired of it, and I just said, you know, I'm not going to church anymore, Mom. I'm not going with you because, you know, I don't see how you can hear this wonderful message and have this knowledge and read about God's teaching and Christ's teaching and come home and just let it all go out the window. And I'd be like, Mom, we can pray about this. And I remember even asking my mom if we could talk to a counselor at church. And oh my God, you know, it was that whole thing about keeping everything swept under the carpet, and you don't air your dirty laundry, and don't you dare go talking to anybody at church about what's going on in my house. There's nothing the church can do that we can't do here. And I said, but Mom, we're not doing anything here. You know, you're not praying. We're not handling this spiritually. So I just quit going. And it seemed like at an early age I had to learn what I saw that was right and in line with our beliefs. And then I had the stuff that I had to throw out. So I knew my mom coming home and going off and using the Lord's name in vain was not in line. But I still held on to what I knew was right in my heart, from what church I did go to, from what I did hear on the religious TV shows that my mom would play every morning. But I never could ever get my mind around her hypocrisy. So I never let go of my faith. That definitely helped. And another thing that I had going for me is I really had great friends. And I used to always say, you know, where God gave me a real challenging family, He gave me very, very, very good friends. And I always had people who would take me in. And as I got older and my mom got worse, it became even more imperative that I have friends who I could turn to. And I remember there were years in particular that were very, very difficult. And I remember turning 21 was really hard. I don't know if it's because my mom realized I was a legal adult and couldn't tell me what to do anymore. But I just remember the year 1988 and the year 1989 being very dark. And I know the sun came out those years, but I remember just being in such a dark place those years. It just seemed like my mother's moods were really like rapid cycling. I think that's a term they use with bipolar, when, you know, throughout the day the moods are just changing, and she just seemed relentless during that time. And I had friends in England, you know, really wonderful people, and I had worked as a cashier the year before, and I had saved up all my money. And I remember when the school semester ended before the summer, I counted up all my money and I said, how far can I go and how long can I stay? And I remember I called up my pen pal's mom in England, and I was just like, you know, is it okay if I come out and stay? Because, you know, sometimes I'd run away to my aunt's house or go hang out with wherever my sisters were staying. And my mother would always have my dad go fetch me, and I couldn't understand why she would want him to come get me because, you know, I'd be like, you know, why do you even want me here? You treat me like crap. And so I said, well, maybe if I go as far away as I can go, there's no way she could reach me. And that's how I started dealing with really difficult times. I would just travel. I went to New York and visited friends, went to Rhode Island, and it seemed like the further away I'd go, the better it was. So having friends and traveling helped. And I threw myself into my education and threw myself into music. And I think those were the main things that really helped me survive. Just, closing my door and reading. My mom respected my education, so no matter how mad she was, if she ever saw me doing schoolwork, something just would snap in her mind and she would back off. So I really used my book learning and my schooling as an escape. And